A record number of women are running for president. So far, 6 women, including 4 senators and a congresswoman, have officially jumped in the race or formed an exploratory committee. But in a New York Times article titled, "A Woman, Just Not That Woman, How Sexism Plays Out on the Trail," Maggie Astor writes, "Few Americans acknowledge they would hesitate to vote for a woman for president, but they don't have to." She goes on, "Reluctance to support female candidates is apparent in the language that voters frequently use to describe men and women running for office, in the qualities that voters say they seek, and in the perceived flaws that voters say they are willing or unwilling to overlook in candidates." Joining me now is Maggie Astor. She's a political reporter for the New York Times. Maggie, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So fascinated to read your piece because I think it pulls together a lot of threads that we've sort of heard about, and now at this moment in our history obviously has such relevance given what we're seeing on the Democratic side. I want to start off by asking you about what are those qualities that voters seek? According to the research that has been conducted in this area, what are those qualities that voters seek in their political leaders?
Well, voters are often looking for a candidate who seems very strong, very tough. There's the classic, who would you want answering the phone at 2 a.m.? So voters really want these qualities that are stereotypically associated with men. And so for a long time, women have tended to try to emphasize those qualities and to run, quote unquote, like men. The issue with that is that in some cases, research shows that can actually cause a backlash where voters consider the woman inauthentic. They don't think she's being herself. And so they consider her less likable and less attractive in that respect.
So I want to talk more about that in a moment. On the Democratic side, as we said, there are already multiple women vying for the nomination. Is there research that would suggest how this could play out?
Well, it's really difficult to say what the dynamics are going to be now that there's 6 women in the race.
We haven't seen this before.
Exactly. And so one of the people I spoke with, Amanda Hunter of the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, she noted that in the past there's been this sort of refrain that people will say they're perfectly willing to vote for a woman, they just don't want to vote for the woman who's in front of them right there. That could be Hillary Clinton. It could be in the 2016 Republican primary, Carly Fiorina. And the thing is that when there's only one woman in a race, it's very difficult to test that statement. It's very difficult to see if it's true that this person would support another woman, just not this one. And when you have 6 women in the race with different backgrounds, with different ideological bents, who are presenting themselves in different ways, I think it's going to be a real test of whether that sentiment is true or whether we start to see the common themes of sexism and dismissal of these women even when there are multiple options.
So you write that one of the ways sexism can manifest itself on the campaign trail is, quote, the likability trap. What is that?
Well, likability is one of the things that voters tend to look for in candidates, regardless of gender. There was the famous question, who would you rather have a beer with? People do look for this. It's not exclusively in women. But the difference is that if a voter, generally speaking, research shows that if a voter looks at a male candidate and says, I don't really find this guy likable, but they do think he's qualified and they like his positions on the issues, they will still vote for him even though they consider him unlikable. Whereas with a woman, likability seems to be this non-negotiable quality. So even if a voter thinks that that woman is otherwise qualified, and they agree with her on the issues, they probably still will not vote for her if they consider her unlikable. There's also the issue that women are often deemed unlikable for behaviors that men would actually be praised for. So if a man speaks very confidently and assertively, That could be a display of the toughness that I mentioned voters looking for. But if a woman speaks that way, she might be called shrill or accused of shouting or lecturing. So the very same qualities can be viewed very differently as unlikable in female candidates.
So is there a way to gauge just how sexism actually impacts votes? What does the research tell us on that?
Well, there has been some research on general elections. And there, it's pretty well established that partisanship overwhelms everything else. I spoke with a political scientist at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Kathleen Dolan, and her research has shown that in a general election, Republicans are going to vote for the Republican nominee and Democrats are going to vote for the Democratic nominee, regardless of gender. But there hasn't been a lot of comparable research in primaries where the partisanship, the loyalty isn't in the equation. So there's very little research on that, and we're really just going to have to see how it plays out.
So whoever is the nominee will likely go up, of course, against President Trump in the general election. And I want to play some of what the president had to say during the 2016 cycle.
And when she walked in front of me, believe me, I wasn't impressed.
You know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
She doesn't have the look. She doesn't have the stamina. I said she doesn't have the stamina, and I don't believe she does have the stamina. She would not be my first choice, that I can tell you.
Replenish the Social Security Trust Fund.
All right, so looking ahead, obviously we don't know who the Democratic nominee is going to be yet, but given what we expect will be the tone and tenor of the general election itself, what are some of the challenges that women on the Democratic side, as they continue down this road of the primary fight, are going to have to face? Because, you know, it's already been said, for instance, of Amy Klobuchar, you know, some have raised the question, is she sort of, quote unquote, tough enough because of her Midwestern sort of affect and the fact that she seems to get along quite well with Republicans who have praised her is stepping into the ring. What are some of the challenges that these Democratic women are going to have to navigate?
Well, there really is this sort of tightrope that they have to walk. They definitely need to convince voters that they have this basic qualification for the job, this basic level of toughness, of intellect, and that sort of baseline qualification is often assumed of male candidates, whereas women have to prove it. But a lot of the ways that women can try to prove that, a lot of the tactics they can try to use have the backlash in terms of likability or authenticity. And
so you get, if you're a female candidate, then one way of thinking of it is like you sort of get points for this, but that can also subtract from this other column, the likability column. Is what it sounds
exactly.
Like.
Yes,
so it's a complicated formula, in other words, for female candidates.
Absolutely, but I would say that the fact that there are 6 women running this time, and the fact that there is more discussion now of sexism than there once was, that could create more room for the women who are running to address the double standards head on and really point them out. So we'll have to see whether they tackle that.
Fascinating times we're living in. Maggie Astor, thanks so much for stopping by, Maggie.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.